Yo guys, Punkrat another video, World of Warcraft guilds. The conversation today is always around method, and maybe a little bit of limit. But I feel like people are forgetting one thing: history. And arguably, at least from the World of Warcraft legacy community standpoint, the timeline and heritage of WoW is really what makes the game so great. People have so many fond memories and love reminiscing about the past. Nostalgia is a big part of human nature. Now, while Method is one of the best guilds ever, without a doubt, I want to take this video to shine some light on some of the best guilds in the history of World of Warcraft. Guilds that were so absolutely spectacular that they built notoriety and name recognition for even decades after they had disbanded. Guilds that I was absolutely mesmerized with at a young age following their heroic feats. Now, I had to really shrink down the list for this video and focus on guilds who had sustained periods of excellence. Guilds that dominated an entire era of World of Warcraft. So I'll apologize in advance if I've missed the specific guild that you were expecting to see on the list. And if you guys have an addition that you want to make, go ahead and feel free to leave it in the comments. Without further ado, here are the best guilds in the history of World of Warcraft. Let's get into it. So let's start off in vanilla with one of my favorite guilds because they were actually on my server. And I also interviewed their guild leader a couple months ago, and one of the first videos that I ever made for this YouTube channel was covering the story of Leia, who tragically passed away. It's Fury from Medivh. Now, most people aren't aware of this guild, but during the extremely early days of World of Warcraft, from Blackwing lair all the way through AQ40, Fury was one of the best guilds worldwide. In fact, they have the most world first kills on the board for vanilla as a whole. Now, their fire did fizzle out eventually, but when I think about vanilla, I tend to think about Fury. And one of the most epic things that they did was actually secure the opening to the AQ40 gates first and get the first Ankaraji mount worldwide. Now, probably the biggest thing that Fury has going against them is that they never actually did secure a world first kill on the final boss of any raid tier. They would usually knock out a lot of the middle bosses first, and eventually they did get beat to clearing the last boss. But nonetheless, Fury is in the history books. And I remember back then, there were tons of guilds from all kinds of different servers who would try to poach members from them, steal their strategies, or people who were just enamored with them from across the globe, even on European servers. And I'd say that's pretty impressive. They also had certain experiences with GMs and open contact with people like Alex Afrasiabi, who was actually in their raid the first time that they opened up the gates to AQ40. And if you guys want to really delve into what it was to be a world first racing guild from back in 2005, go ahead and check the podcast that I did with Calahad a while ago. I'll link it in the description. Now, I know a lot of you guys probably don't want to give too much credit to Fury, and in a certain way, I understand you. You're thinking of two different names that I probably should have mentioned in the context of vanilla, but I thought it would probably be smarter to push those two guilds over to the next expansion, the Burning Crusade. The first being, I'm sure you guys know what it is, Nahum. Now, Nahum did two incredible things in vanilla, so we have to mention it before we talk about anything. They were the first guild to kill Cthulhu and the first guild to kill Kel'Thuzad, which are probably the two most important bosses when talking about vanilla raiding. But that's kind of the point. They came at the end of vanilla. There was another top guild that ended up disbanding, and Nahum absorbed all of their top players. Begun. Now, shooting into the Burning Crusade, this was the era of Nahum. It was absolutely dominated by them, and I really mean dominated. They got pretty much every single world first kill available, and they secured almost every final boss kill, which is extremely impressive in terms of TBC raiding content, because you had certain raids where it was all about the last boss. Think about the tier 5 raids in particular. It was all about Lady Vash and Kel'Thas respectively. The leaders of Nahum became World of Warcraft royalty during the golden age of World of Warcraft. Kungan was known as that Tauren tank with the Thunder Fury worldwide, and the kill videos, which were recorded by Awake, the Blood Elf Holy Pally, were some of the most viewed raid encounter videos on Warcraft movies ever, especially from back then. They were just a level ahead of everybody else. That's really what it was, Nahum and everybody else. Well, except for one guild. And this is also a guild that I purposely omitted from vanilla because they only rose to prominence during naxx, where they secured a good amount of kills. We're talking about death and taxes. There's only two things in life that you can't escape: death and taxes. Well, I guess if you're Jeff Bezos, you could probably escape taxes though, right? Now, at that time, there was only one guild who was even close to rivaling the absolute supremacy of Nahum, and that was D&T. In Serpent Shrine Cavern, they got a lot of world first kills, but Nahum ended up beating them to Vash, which is really what was important. As I stated in vanilla as well, they got a ton of world first kills in naxx, but Nahum beat them to Kel'Thuzad. Now, I'm sure a lot of you old school players out there remember death and taxes, but they did suffer, I guess, from a little bit of a little brother syndrome. They always ended up coming in second place, but regardless of that, they still do have a very strong legacy from vanilla all the way through TBC, especially considering back then there was 12 million active players for long periods of time. The game had extremely high populations with high levels of engagement back then for long periods of time. It wasn't like World of Warcraft today where there's a peak right off the release and then everyone's gone, and the people that continue to play are a fraction of the base that actually bought the expansion. And I've always said a game is as competitive as its player base dictates. If there's 100 people playing a game, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get in the top 100. But if there's 12 million people playing the game, now's when it gets seriously competitive. And they were seriously competitive for quite a long time during, as I stated in the intro, the golden era of World of Warcraft. Now, right towards the end of the Burning Crusade, there's actually two quite familiar names that we have to talk about. Now, these guilds didn't have a very long sustained history of excellence within World of Warcraft, but they made their legacies in a way more interesting way outside of the game. We're going to talk about both of them together: SK Gaming and Curse. SK Gaming was extremely competitive. In fact, they got the world first kill Jaden kill in Sunwell, where Curse was always hovering at the top, but they really only got two world firsts in TBC, in Khaz'Ra'gul and Asgalor, which if you've ever done Hydral in TBC is not super impressive, but still, it's nothing to scoff at. But what's so amazing about these two names is that they transcended World of Warcraft and are still household names in the world of esports. So Curse is one of the biggest add-on repositories over the history of this entire game. Where you were downloading all of your add-ons and getting viruses from was curse.com. And later on, they ended up using their brand recognition to start esports teams, which were relatively successful across many different games. SK Gaming, the exact same thing. In fact, SK Gaming is still going strong in the League of Legends scene to this day. I believe Curse might be as well, but I think they might have rebranded or something. I haven't really been following over the last 2 years, but they're definitely two household names that transcended from their humble beginnings in World of Warcraft. There's a reason why Classic WoW was so popular, and so many pro players and people from all kinds of different game genres ended up coming back to play it. This is where it all started. Everyone grew up playing World of Warcraft. In a certain way, it's kind of like the motherland to mainstream modern gaming. Now let's go into Wrath of the Lich King, where at first one guild completely dominated everything until one tragic event. That guild, Insidia, which is actually Nahum 2.0, led by the same guy, Kungan. Now at the start of Wrath of the Lich King, Insidia got every single world first kill. In Uldar, they started slowing down a little bit, but they did end up getting Mimiron and Algalon the Observer. But once ICC came around, this is where tragedy struck. During the first week of clearing normal mode ICC before heroic mode was even available, they got banned for using Saronite bombs and glitching out the platform of the Lich King. Now you might ask yourself, why would one of the best guilds of all time cheat on normal mode Lich King? Well, from the words of Kungan himself, they didn't. They were just using Saronite bombs in their rotation and hadn't even realized that they had affected the platform whatsoever. They just thought it was part of the fight that the platform came back. But they ended up getting suspensions for this and lost their ability to compete in the world first race going forward. Now that's the story from Kungan. Who knows what really happened, but you guys can go and check out this video of Kungan talking about the whole story from his perspective, because he can do a lot better than I can at explaining it. So I'll put the link to that video in the description. But as Insidia started to slow down, it was time for some other guilds to take the reign. And ICC was exactly where two guilds started doing that and making a name for themselves. One of those guilds, or the first one that we're going to talk about, is Vodka. Now Vodka had been trying to get to the forefront of WoW raiding since vanilla. The only world first kill that they had was on Twin Emperors in AQ40, although that's a really good boss to have a world first kill on. Twin Emps was one of the hardest bosses back then, so this guild was no joke. They were always right behind the leader, but at the end of Wrath of the Lich King is when they actually got their name on the board consistently. In ICC, they got almost every single world first kill. They weren't able to finish it off on Heroic Lich King and Sindragosa, but they did pretty much dominate everywhere else within that raid. And Vodka had been a household name for a really long time, fighting for that, so good for them, and they're definitely one of the best guilds in the history of WoW. Now the guild that ended up edging right over Vodka to secure the world first Heroic Lich King kill is Paragon. Again, one of the best guilds ever. Paragon had slowly been inching their way up to the top. They got the first kill on Anu Barak in Heroic TOGC, and then finished strong getting Heroic Lich King. Heroic Lich King probably being one of the most iconic World of Warcraft raid encounters ever. Wrath was just a special time where WoW was probably at its peak. And then moving into Cataclysm, they maintained their dominance, securing World First Nefarian, World First Sinestra, World First Alakir, World First Ragnaros and Firelands, pretty much dominating all of the final bosses in Cataclysm. And interestingly enough, a guild that closely trailed Paragon during the times of Cataclysm was Method. This is where Method was really starting to gain a name for themselves, but it's definitely not the era of Method, so we won't go into that just yet. Cataclysm was the era of Paragon. Their legacy has strongly been cemented over their dominance from the end of Wrath of the Lich King all the way through Cataclysm. Now going into Mists of Pandaria, there was one guild left to secure some pride for North America or the US region as a whole. Over the last couple of expansions, basically since Nihilum, world first races have been dominated by EU. Well, during MOP, there was one American guild that started clawing back to the top. We're talking about Blood Legion, a guild from Illidan that surprisingly enough was actually founded in 2004, a guild that had been fighting to get to the top from vanilla all the way to MOP, where they finally were able to reach those dreams. That's a long, hard fought battle. In fact, I think they're actually still going, still raiding in retail to this day. The beauty of Blood Legion is just that underdog story, not making it to the top for so long and then eventually persevering and creating the era of Blood Legion, which was the early days of MOP, where they secured pretty much every single world first within that expansion, only sometimes getting beat out to final bosses by Method. And this is really where Method started to shine. Towards the end of MOP, they were clearly a dominant force to be dealt with. And going into Warlords of Draenor, they secured some of the most important world first kills, Archimonde and Blackhand as two good examples. Now at this point in WoW's history, it kind of became a battle between only a couple guilds, where earlier on there were so many guilds who could potentially get the world first kill, and it's why sometimes you'll see raid tiers that have so many different names getting different bosses as a world first. At this point, the battle was really between Method, Blood Legion, Midwinter, and sometimes Paragon sneaking in. There was also an Oceanic guild called Ascension, which had some little glimpses of brilliance, and then one guild which you probably know quite well that started to shine out of the mud. That guild's name, Limit. Going into Legion, Limit started to really pick up steam, snowballing into the Goliath that we know today as Complexity Limit. In the most recent world first race, we've seen exactly what they're made of. To be honest, watching the world first race with some of the most crisp raid leadership I've pretty much ever seen, they've absolutely dominated Mythic Ny'alotha, and since now they're partnered with Complexity, you know that they're just getting started, and possibly and hopefully they haven't peaked and the best is yet to come. So that's pretty much the video. A lot to cover because it's basically almost like 20 years at this point of World of Warcraft. What is it, 16 years? I say it all the time, we're becoming boomers, boys. This is actually a video that I've been planning to make for a long time, and now that Classic is just kind of smooth sailing until the next era of Legacy Realms, I'm going to be slowing down actually the pace that I'm releasing videos and just trying to think about some interesting video concepts that really delve into the nostalgia of World of Warcraft, the history, which has always been my fascination with the game. So this is the first of more to come, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe. You know the drill, soldiers. Hit the notification bell to be notified every single time I post a new video straight out of the render oven. And with that said, thanks for watching, good luck making history, gamers, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.